Welcome to Magic.ai, the operating system for hospitality. At Magic, we know an operating system is more than just software and systems. It's about people, because hospitality is nothing without them. So supporting the hospitality community is our number one goal.
I think there needs to be more of a support system. Like, you have to love this business and you have to love every aspect of it, including sharing tribal knowledge on what is successful and also tribal knowledge of what is a failure.
Founded by lifelong experts, we're building the place where everyone in hospitality, from seasoned pros to first-timers, can gather, share, and grow together. Plus, we're crafting scalable tools and AI-supported software to boost your business. Dive into our vibrant community platform packed with meaningful conversations and robust tools and templates designed just for you. Need more? Our custom software solutions have got you covered. From recruiting and staffing to digital playbooks and dashboards, we're working on building a unique hub of resources unlike any other. Magic is your single point of origin for important conversations, accessible tools, valuable insights, and more. Join us at magic.ai. The evolution of hospitality is here.
One, they're this huge employer, 15 million people roughly in the independent food sector alone. They drive nearly $1 trillion in purchasing power each year. Everything from the lemons to the linens, the chefs are responsible for those decisions and responsible for sending that money out into the world. We also saw that there were no federal dollars dedicated to preventing food waste. No food education campaigns for consumers, no grant money for anaerobic digesters in communities, no motivations.
Katherine Miller, called one of the most innovative women in food and beverage by Fortune and Food and Wine magazines, works with foundations, nonprofits, and socially responsible companies to develop, execute, and evaluate social impact strategies. She previously served as Vice President of Impact at the James Beard Foundation and founding executive director of the Chef Action Network. She is adjunct professor at the Culinary Institute of America, where she teaches leadership, engagement, and impact. Her book, At the Table, The Chef's Guide to Advocacy, is considered a must-read by Food Tank and Civil Eats. She is a past board member of RAIN, the National Sexual Assault Hotline, and NARAL, Pro-Choice America. She's a member of Les Dames Escoffier and on the board of directors of the New Venture Fund and ReHer.
If one is a chef, has an existing restaurant, and is really interested in making the changes that are good for your employees or good for your community, I think it all starts with finding your peers who are doing the same thing and going on that learning journey together. And then I do think the values have to be authentic. You can't just slap a bunch of buzzwords on a restaurant or a menu and not live it.
I was so excited to talk to you because you're one of the people that I never get enough time with, but that I'm always watching. And I think we originally met thanks to James Beard Foundation's boot camp,
Yep.
Which the one that I attended was in Glendale, New York. And most people kind of know JBF for the awards or, as being the arbiter of who's who in food. I would love to kind of you to tell us a little bit about the relationship with JBF and how that came to be, and also why, you thought collaborating with them would have a beneficial impact for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, James Beard really is known as the awards and the arbiter of, of taste in America when it comes to restaurants and culinary endeavors. And what it realized in sort of 2010, 2011 was that chefs were being treated like rock stars. Right? They were on the cover of magazines. People were profiling their tattoos and who they were dating and what was happening. And we were sort of seeing this explosion of food TV. And I had the benefit of learning from the people who had helped train rock stars like Pearl Jam and Bruce Springsteen and others to be successful policy advocates. And they came to me, one was a board member, Eric Kessler, and the other was a chef, Michel Nichon. And they said, we'd like to do that same thing for chefs. They have this cultural power, these followings, and we want them to be walking the halls of Congress and focusing on food policy. Honestly, I told them it was the stupidest idea I'd ever heard in my life, right? Because at that point in my food education, chefs were they were distant, right?
Mm.
They were bad boys. They were people who yelled at people in kitchens,
Yeah.
right? And I couldn't see it. And then but they asked me to do it, and it turns out I'm kind of a cheap date because the very first training was at Blackberry Farm in Tennessee, right?
My gosh, what a spot.
What a spot, right? Like, this gorgeous, idyllic place, and I was standing on a mountaintop, and it's like no joke, right? And there were these amazing culinary icons, right? Andrea Rusing from North Carolina, Maria Hines, who had one of the first organic Tilth certified restaurants in the country, Kathy Wims, celebrity chefs like Rock Harper, who had just won Hell's Kitchen, right? And and there was Sean Brock, right, standing in this mist, right? And as I had been flying to Tennessee, he was in every single magazine I had picked up that month, right? Because he was at the height of the Sean Brockness of it all. And I remember thinking, like, we spend all this time working, on social causes. We find all this time trying to build authentic relationships with celebrities, right? Like, get Lady Gaga to do something or get David Beckham to kick a soccer ball for malaria. And really what we need for these social causes and to accelerate them is authentic, community-based spokespeople who can help us translate really complicated topics into something as simple as a plate of food, right? So chefs are really good at that translation from soil quality to the salad, right? And that's when the penny dropped, and it totally changed my life. I spent a bunch of time doing it. And the thing with JBF was that they weren't so sure either as an organization, right? Like, what does this do to our brand? We don't want to get into policy. We don't want to get into Congress, that kind of stuff. But over 10 years of doing that work and training thousands of chefs around the country, they heard from their own constituency that this was something that they wanted JBF to do, right? And so that led to the creation of these impact programs, things like sustainable seafood campaigns, food waste reduction campaigns, efforts to put folks focused on climate change now. But it really was an evolution for everybody, right? Because it wasn't obvious until you saw it in action.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. I read your book. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. And I understand and agree with you about why chefs are so well suited for advocacy, right? Their natural leadership abilities, they have their pulse on their communities, some of the things you already mentioned. Can you help our listeners who maybe haven't had the opportunity yet to read your book understand a few more reasons why chefs are so well suited for advocacy?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? And I think one of the things that people don't really think about, because we don't think about restaurants as an organized community, right? My favorite restaurant is on my corner, right? The chef who cooks my dish is my favorite chef, but we don't think about them as what they really are, which are drivers of the American economy, right? Almost everybody in America started their job working in food service somewhere, right? From vice presidential and presidential candidates to members of Congress to, others, right? So one, they're this huge employer, the 15 million people roughly in the independent food sector alone. They drive nearly $1 trillion in purchasing power each year, right? Everything from the lemons to the linens. The chefs are responsible for those decisions and responsible for sending that money out into the world. And we know from economic studies that if you spend $1 in your local community, you'll generate 3. So, right. So if we think about the power of a local restaurant, right, it's also our community space, right? Like, it's the place where we go to celebrate birthdays. It's the place where we go to mourn relationships, right? It's the place. I mean, I signed my first mortgage payment, got my first big job, and broke up with my first significant lifelong relationship all at a table in a restaurant.
Yep.
Right. And so that's the power these folks hold on to us, right? It's also a place, as I mentioned, that it can help us translate really complicated things, right? If we think about, none of us really want to think about sustainable seafood when we're out eating, right? Like my husband hates to go to dinner with me because I'm like, where was the squid caught and where's the fish, right? But that's not everybody's experience, right? Most of us just want to go and have a delicious meal, right?
Yeah.
But a chef in a restaurant can help you build awareness about that, right? Like, why do you have this grain on your menu? Why this fish, not this fish, right? Why can't I get tuna at your restaurant,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And those are the kind of conversations that we want to have, because it's also, successful advocacy is about the conversation, right?
It's
And
about it's about the conversion rate too, right?
yeah,
Because then you actually build awareness and you build consideration, and you have people who actually now are going out to restaurants and they feel good about making those decisions, right? So
yeah.
it
Well,
trickles down.
they feel good about it, and they also know why they're making that decision, right? Okay, I had that at this restaurant, and that was really delicious. So I'm going to trust, if I see it on another menu, I can have it there. And then when somebody at my table asks me, well, why are you eating that thing that's called tilefish? I don't know what that is. The consumer becomes uneducated. And when we think about advocacy communications, we're really focused, as Matt, as you were saying, about, we want to build awareness. We want that awareness to turn into sort of a commitment, right? That curiosity to move to a commitment to something. And then ultimately, we want those people who are committed and understand things to go out and champion them themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the trajectory we want to take people on. And chefs, Caroline, they're great translators of that.
Mm. And you say that there are roughly 20 federal departments and agencies that play a role in shaping our food systems, right? And can you tell us a little bit about like a few of those, and specifically kind of how those policies that they create affect restaurant owners and operators, even just as diners? I think, there's some great examples there.
Yeah, I mean, I always think about eggs, like they're the easiest translated one, right? Like everybody has an egg, right? And eggs are regulated at every step, from the farm where the chicken is raised to how the chicken is raised. So the inputs into that chicken, is it free range? Is it in a confined feeding operation, right? Those types of things related to. So the place that they're raised, how they're raised. Once a chicken lays an egg, right, the egg is regulated both on the outside of the egg and the inside
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
the egg, right?
Yeah, that's
And
wild.
then it is related to marketing. So all these things like got egg, right? Those types of things, got milk, got egg, right? Those types of things are actually federal government marketing campaigns to bolster agricultural industries, right? And so across that, you are touching federal law, state law, and in some cases, even city law, right? And so that impacts everything from how long something can stay on a shelf, how much it costs, the
Mm.
transportation. And so when you're a chef in a restaurant, right, you're dealing with all of that on a daily basis, and it maybe impacts what you can put on the plate that day, just like it would at home, right?
So that seems incredibly daunting to me. um, and I thought about this a lot while I was reading your book, the navigation of the complex systems. You talk about competing with paid lobbyists and other advocate groups, sometimes hundreds. Bills take years to write and hopefully pass into law. How do you break down the process to make it less intimidating for someone non-political, like a chef, to get involved?
Yeah, and I think there's a distinction that I'll just make. I don't think about, I always think about the politics of food, but we're not getting into the partisanship of food, right? Food is something that connects us all, right? It is the thing that
Yes.
determines our health, our personal health. It's the thing that determines whole economies. It's the thing that creates community, right? And so when we think about policy, it's kind of, you always have to think about what is the thing that you want to change, right? Because maybe you don't want to change, or eggs are too daunting. But let's think about food waste, right? So food waste is one of these entry level things for chefs, right? Every chef is dealing with a really tight bottom line for their restaurant, right? A margin of revenue that's this big, right?
A
And
sliver.
so waste is ingrained in who you all are, right? And reducing that waste. And so we saw that. We also saw that there were no federal dollars dedicated to preventing food waste, right? None of those things existed for food waste. No food education campaigns for consumers, no grant money for anaerobic digesters in communities, no motivations, right? And so there was a real openness there. And so sometimes you kind of have to look for that opening as opposed to taking on this hugely complex thing. But either way, it's looking for the opening. What's the possibility that I have as an individual or consumer, chef or something else, to walk into this room, and how can I um, dedicate my platform, the followers, the things, my menu space, my Instagram feed, whatever it is, to advancing that issue? Because the other thing is, like, none of us are doing this on our own, right? And so we need to partner with other organizations. So my hope is that chefs get really curious about issues. Then they start to interact within the community of organizations and people that are working on those issues and listen and learn, right? And then they become themselves those committed champions and are utilizing their platform in those ways. And so, like, when we started with food waste, that's kind of what we did. We looked for our opening related to it, but then it was also a lot of time educating people about what things weren't there, how they could get involved, networking with folks in the community, and then using the chef voice and platform to really accelerate the conversation around food waste.
Yeah. And it's funny because yet, while hospitality creates a great conduit for change in so many ways, there's still like some food justice advocates that are skeptical of chefs becoming involved in advocacy, right? And I think, like, many chefs, several of whom we've had on this podcast, treat their employees really well. They provide health care, they pay above minimum wage, they try to ensure that they've got some kind of work-life balance, but that's not the norm. And as you kind of have addressed in your book, it's more normal that, people in the industry are overworked and undercompensated, and as business owners struggle to survive, right?
Yeah.
And it's all kind of happening at the same time. You talk about some things that contribute to that struggle: opaque laws, age-old practices, financial considerations. Can you help kind of the listeners understand those specific traps?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting things about the chef and restaurant industry is it's a very innovative field, right? But the way we train chefs and the business models haven't innovated since since the 1880s, right? Culinary school is still teaching a brigade system, a militaristic way of managing your staff on a line, right? Business practices are still dealing with antiquated wage and workforce laws that haven't really changed since the 1990s,
Yeah.
right? And so we're expecting this industry to innovate within this system that isn't innovative at all, right? And so
Left
that
behind. It's been
it,
left behind.
it's been totally left behind. I mean, and I think about, I think about wage more than probably most people, right? Not most people, but I think about wage a lot, right? And tipping has its roots in slavery. We started tipping people because we didn't want to pay freed Black Americans a wage, right? So that it was like, oh, we'll give them whatever, right? And they'll be happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that has led to literally the only people who in this country can be paid a sub-minimum wage are farm workers and restaurant workers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
I did not know that tipping, that is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The roots of tipping is in slavery, right? And when the Civil War was over and freed Black Americans all over this country wanted jobs, there was still inherent systemic racism. And so how were they paid? They were paid with whatever people wanted to give them.
And we've kind of fucked it up, though, because, well, in a lot of ways, but with tipping specifically, because now that's what the diner expects and it's what the diner wants. I've seen so many organizations and businesses try to kind of go into this new foray of adding service fees or, autograts or whatever the case may be. And it may work for a little while, but then there's so much pushback from people that they end up reverting to, the tipping system. Yeah. And it's just because we've done that. Like we did that to ourselves,
Yeah, and I think it's also, I always feel for the long established restaurant or restaurateur or chef who is trying to retrofit their establishment to fit the new mores related to social justice, the new world around livable wages and in inexpensive communities, who are very different than the folks who can start from scratch, right? And so I live in Washington, D.C., and, I belong to a network of women restaurant chefs and restaurant owners. And the people helping the long-established restaurateurs make the transition are actually the people who opened their restaurants 2019 and after, right? Because
can you explain why that is?
Because most of the folks who are opening in new conditions are opening under the conditions of social justice advocacy around livable wages. So, right, like the demands by younger people within the culinary industry to want mental health care or access to health insurance, right? We're coming post Obama and ACA, right? So there's a new set of owners and a new set of regulations that are easier for those folks who are starting from scratch to adopt, right? So one person that you guys want to talk to at some point is a woman named Hollis Silverman. So Hollis owns a small restaurant group here in Washington, D.C., Eastern Point Collective. She has 3 or 4 different restaurants. And she opened her restaurants all with an autograt that's 25% of the check, right? She grants maternity leave. She has mental health care coverage. She has livable wage. She has profit sharing. She has the whole gamut. And she will say right out, she could not have done that when she was working for Jose Andres as operations, because how were you going to square what you were going to pay, the salary increases for the back of the house to match the thing, the salary decreases for the front of the house because they weren't going to make tips, right? And so it was just so much easier to start with a clean slate than it is to retrofit, right? Because also the retrofit, this is the last thing I'll say about this, is you're dealing with that long-standing customer, right? So I think about there's a long 25-year plus restaurant here in Washington, D.C., who's went to a no tip, full service included, and the customers freaked out because for 25 years that hasn't been the case for them, right? And she's pulling her hair out trying to educate consumers about why her pizzas are now that the check has not changed, right?
Right.
But it is more.
It just reads differently.
And so like those two things in my own city couldn't be more different, right?
Wow. So how do you see a way for those people who are looking to retrofit, who have been in a restaurant for a long time? Do you have any suggestions for how they can do better for their employees with the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an ongoing education and learning process, right? So one of the things that I love about this community of restaurants in Washington, D.C. is that they talk to each other, right? So Hollis is sharing the language that she puts on her check, right? She literally shared how you change the computer, like the printout on the check, so it doesn't even have a tip option. Right? Like, but she had to help somebody understand to understand that you could actually take the tip option off the bill, right?
Right. Like, so why would you ever do that? Yeah.
Why would you ever do that, right? So some of those basic things, but I do think it's if one is a chef that is interested, has an existing restaurant and is really interested in making the changes that are good for your employees or good for your community, good for you as a business owner, right? I think it all starts with finding your peers who are doing the same thing and going on that learning journey together. Because there are people in each of our towns now and across the United States who are doing all of those things, just like Hollis. Hollis is not an anomaly anymore,
Right.
right?
Maybe 15 years ago, she would have been.
Yeah, 15 years ago when, people were, when the first experiment of Danny Meyer, taking tips off the check at Union Square Hospitality, where it was seen as like, oh, somebody who's like got a fancy pants restaurant and $1 billion, hamburger company, you can do that. Right. And now it's not an anomaly. It's not a rare thing. Right. And honestly, I do think that if you're not thinking about it as a restaurateur, you're really going to find yourself on the outs in the next 5 to 10 years because consumers want it. They might not understand it.
And that's a great kind of lead into my next question, which is like, at the end of the day, these are businesses, right? And like I think all of us on this call can agree that these things are important and they should be important. But there's definitely a tranche of people out there who may not see as much value, right, in kind of what it means to be locally involved on those levels. And I guess I would just say to those people that there is information that will show you that I think higher levels of engagement with advocacy in the issues, and particularly as they relate to your, specific community, add bottom line. Like they just do, because they will bring in the types of customers that you want to have, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all want to put butts in seats. And we all want people to, I mean, the old adage, right? There's no such thing as a sustainable restaurant that's out of business, right? So you can have all the things, but if you can't make the bottom line work, right, it doesn't work. And I think people are and I understand that people are very scared of that idea, right? It's a fear that permeates almost every active sector of the global economy, right? Am I going to go out of business? Is my margin too tight? What's my cash flow? Right. But I do think our consumer communities are shifting and changing from Gen X to the alphas, right? The newest generation.
Is that what they're called?
I think they're called like the double A's or something like that. They're the alphas.
Okay.
They are all much more concerned about values. They're really about loyalty, right? Yeah. So if you have two restaurants that are next to each other and one is values aligned and the other isn't, right? It's more likely that the money is going to flow in that direction, right? And it's going to be loyalty. And so there are a lot of new factors coming in. And I get it. It's scary. Like I'm a businesswoman. Like it's really scary to think about margins and those types of things. But I just think that one, you have to, and the consumer landscape is changing and you'll get left behind if you don't. And then I do think the values have to be authentic, right? Like you can't just slap a bunch of buzzwords on a restaurant or a menu. Right. And not live it, right? I mean, we've seen this time and time again, exposés about food fraud in America where people say they sourced from a certain farm and they bought 1 bushel of lettuce from them at one point and never again.
You have to do the work.
You got to do the work, right? And if that means that maybe one day you don't have peaches and burrata on the menu because peaches aren't in season, explaining to your customers like, well, now we have, we've taken that off the menu, replaced it with chicken liver pate, or we replaced it with something, a zucchini squash cake or something, right? Like as long as it's delicious, your customers will follow.
Yeah. Yep. Make it delicious and put in the work to make it so. Yep. Yeah.
Carolyn,
did you have anything else you wanted to touch on?
I think I have a question just in general about sort of the chef advocacy boot camp, and
Yep.
when chefs come, are they interested, or a lot of the chefs you see coming to the boot camp, are they interested in impacting their local community, the greater community, the restaurant industry, or nationally? Sort of, does it range? Do people come and say, this might sound silly, but that they're interested in learning about the global fishery management treaty, or do they say, I just want to know how I can help hungry people in my local community? And how do you attend to both of those need, or sort of that range of needs of people coming to learn about advocacy?
Yeah, so the Chef's Boot Camp for Policy and Change is now an official program of the James Beard Foundation. It's started in 2012, and so now it's in its 12th, 13th year. I think since I've left, they've continued the program. But I did 10 years of that program, and what I saw develop over time, and I think it's still the case, as I talked to my friend and peer Ann McBride, who's the VP of Impact Programs now at the foundation, often about this, is what we've gone from is when we first built the program, the main reason chefs wanted to come to the program was because it was a James Beard program, and they thought it would get them recognized by the foundation, right? And they would come and they'd be like, I don't know why I got this invitation. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what I want to do. And by the end of the 3 days, which is a pretty intensive 3 days, no phones, no cell phones, they're off there on a farm. They're learning about things. They see a live animal slaughter. There's lots of stuff that happens at that boot camp to build an emotional connection amongst the cohort and introduce their brains to new concepts and activities. And at the end, they would all walk away having to commit to something, right? So for some, it was, I'm going to commit to learn more about an issue. For some, it was like, oh my God, this is make me double down on fisheries and sustainable seafood, right? And that shifted over the 10 years. There were far less people who were there specifically because it was a beard program, and more because they had heard from their own community of peers, other chefs, that this was going to help them make a difference on their own table. So the sourcing within their own community, so help them strengthen their relationship with community-based organizations. And if they really wanted to go down the deep end into sort of policy and change pieces, and all of those things were available to them. Now, what I've seen in the last year or so that I led the program, and now what I see with the cohorts that Ann is leading, is people are coming in much more focused on, I have a specific issue, right? I want to work with Native tribal communities. I want to work on food access and on specific communities. I really want to work on minimum wage. And so there's a little bit more people coming in with an idea of what they want to work on. And the boot camp the curriculum hasn't changed over those 10 plus years. What's changed is the audience, and what everybody walks away with are some very practical tips and tools on how to be the most effective advocate that you can possibly be in each of those areas, on the table, in your community, or in policy.
Yeah. And they walk away with some good dance moves, because I remember some good dance moves being had in Glendale. And we already had a conversation with Emily Lucchetti, and she reminded me of how much fun we had that night too. And I think that's important. Like, you have to present it in a formula that actually resonates, and that, people, I mean, I killed and butchered my first animal at that event. It was the first time I was exposed to something so profound, and that stuff sticks with you, right? Like, when you're in an environment where you're just getting bombarded with information and seeing and hearing about things that you haven't considered, it's impactful for sure.
Yeah. And I think that, the other thing is like, kind of know your audience. Like, when we were developing the training, we knew that people wouldn't sit still for long periods of time.
Yeah.
Right. Because this is not an audience
with chefs.
With chefs. Right.
Yeah.
So
what are you trying to say?
Right. Like, but we knew. So like the segments of the programming and the training were broken up into like smaller bite-sized pieces. Right.
Yeah.
we knew that one of the things that chefs were always going to be most interested, one of the easy ways to translate complicated policies and procedures to chefs was to show them what was happening on the farm, right? So introducing them to butchers and animal advocates who couldn't access USDA slaughterhouses, right? Or was a way to open up a conversation of like, if you're going to serve meat, maybe this is something both that you should see, but you should also understand how to source the best products, right? And the things that are in that way. And so, that was the other piece about the training was, and the third piece was about building community, right? Like I love getting text messages and emails from people who are like, oh my God, I saw so-and-so, who I met at boot camp or who I met at a policy summit or, right? Because now you've also found your own people who can help reinforce your work, right?
Yeah, it creates that community where people can continue to engage with each other on important issues and almost kind of push each other more.
Yeah.
Which is great.
And ask for help. How did you do that in your community? What did you find most useful? I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, Chris Shepard, who created Southern Smoke, right, which is probably right now one of the biggest, supporters of mental health and additional resources in the community. Some of the first calls that Chris made were to other chefs in the community who had worked on mental health, like what programs had worked. So talk to, Patrick Mulvaney, who created a program in New York, in California, or, reached out to other chefs to be on his board, right? Or worked with Paula Velez, who created Bakers Against Racism. So like, if this is what you want to do, there's lots of people even within the chef community who are doing cool shit, and they're there to work with you on it.
And if you don't know what progress has been made in the area that you're interested in, you're likely going to duplicate that work or struggle more than if you know what's going on and the progress other people have made. You can sort of hop on where they are and push it forward instead of starting again.
Yeah. I mean, the number one thing that people say to me all the time is like, oh, I think I want to start a nonprofit, or I think I want to start a foundation. And it's like, no, you do not. Right? There are already too many resource-strapped organizations who would actually benefit from some of us perking our ego a little and rolling up our sleeves and getting in there and being like, okay, well, I'm here to help, right? And listening and learning and being super aware of our own sort of space in this. And because I've seen a lot of chef advocacy and a lot of chef nonprofits die because they think I'm going to raise millions of dollars, and there's already 10 organizations that do that, and there are only 6 funders, right? So I'm like, please don't start another nonprofit.
Just get involved.
Just get involved. It's all one baby step, right?
Who is the one person that you have hired who has transformed your business?
Oh my gosh. That's such a, at the James Beard Foundation, there was an amazing program manager, Emily Rothkrug, and another, Megan Storms. Megan's still there as the Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Program. She now leads that program, and Emily's chief. And I'd say they transformed the work at Beard because they brought an energy, a kind of can-do attitude, and also a big push about why am I doing this? Right?
Lots of candor.
Candor, right? So I'm a big fan of those types of people. I often say that I won't ever hire anybody who hasn't worked on a political campaign, because I want people that understand deadlines, can do something quickly and succinctly, who are willing to step in and step up when needed, but also who are kind of like, why? Right?
Yep. Love it.
Is this the most efficient way to do it? Is this
the
just
most efficient way to do it? Right? Is this what we should be doing? And then I think our job as managers is to embrace those people, right? And give them all the leeway that they can to be successful, right? Like
Totally.
I never had to think about a single thing really that Emily or Megan ever did.
That's awesome. Love it.
All right. Next question is about marketing. What's the most successful marketing decision you made for your business or for your book, for that matter?
Yeah. I mean, I will be honest. I invested in a publicist for the book.
Great. That's such a great, that's great. If you don't
like we all think that like, oh, my cat is rocking the screen back and forth. So hopefully, but
Lily,
like we all think we're going to be able to market these things, right? Like, oh my God, I know thousands of chefs around the country, blah, blah, blah. Spend the money to do the thing. And then also
do it well.
And it also gives you a level of accountability, right? So like I met every week with my publicist. Where's this? How's this? How can we help? Blah, blah, blah. And and I think that it's my pet peeve about restaurants. Restaurants are always like, oh, I don't want to pay for publicity. It's too expensive. I'm going to like figure it out. And it's like, you're not going to figure out. Go get a freaking publicist. Like your job is to get butts in seats and no one's going to know you're there.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. All right. The last one is, what is the one tool that you use every day?
Oh my God. Besides my iPhone.
We have gotten that answer.
My iPhone. My kitchen tool has to be a multi-purpose microplane because you can zest with it. You can do cheese with it. You can like do all the things with a microplane, which would make my husband laugh because when we moved in together, he had like 6 and I was like, no, you're only allowed 1. Right?
One really good one that you take care of.
One really good one, right?
Yeah.
But probably that's probably my kitchen tool that I use most. My work tool is probably is probably my iPhone and all its various functions.
I love microplanes. I love just like microplaning hard cheese on salads and like it's like my favorite thing.
That snow.
So it's so satisfying.
So beautiful.
It's so satisfying, right?
It totally is.
Yeah.
Okay, one question go ahead, Caroline.
Oh, I was so one question that we typically ask at the top of the hour, but I think we dove in so quickly is, do you have a guilty pleasure for $20 or less?
Is it a food guilty pleasure or just a general?
Anything.
So I travel a lot, and for $20 or less, I can buy an Us Weekly and a bag of Twizzlers. And
wait a minute, this is my wife's guilty pleasure.
And I buy it, and I do this on the train home, to and from New York, if whichever direction I'm going in the evening, and I buy a bag of Twizzlers. I buy probably a cheap glass of wine on the Estella and an Us Weekly, and that
you can get all that for $20.
Yeah.
Wow, you are thrifty. I like it.
That's great.
It's not great wine.
Well, yeah.
And I don't get the king-size bag of Twizzlers.
That's like me with coffee. People have been making fun of me because I appear with my so this is our local Vermont gas station. I mean, it's like, at some point, coffee's coffee, wine's wine, whatever.
Yeah.
Does the job.
Matt and I disagree on that point.
Well, it's coming from the woman who had a iced matcha delivered to her yesterday via a courier service.
Hey, excuse
me.
Yes,
correct.
We had very tight back-to-back filmings, and I needed some caffeine. I didn't have time to make my own matcha.
She's like, I just ordered a matcha. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Well, I work from home, and on the days that my husband is not working, I order things as well because I text him and I'm like, I need a Diet Coke upstairs, please, or what time is my smoothie arriving?
So that's what Matt asked. I said, I just ordered a matcha, and he said, did you ask Erin to make you a matcha? No, did not ask my wife